Now, one of the things that's happening at the moment, in fact, we had something that happened last Friday, was the USP Open Day, is a lot of secondary school students are now making plans to further their education after secondary school. It's a very, very important time.
Choices.
Exactly, choices.
To make.
But not just choices, but making the right choice. Yeah, making the right choice in life so that you don't end up like Sylvester and I. So, Sylvester was supposed to be a banker. My parents
wanted... That is a big dream to work in the bank. When I studied banking finance, here I am in the media.
There you go. My mother wanted me to become a lawyer. There you go. I talk for a living, but not the kind of talking that I think she had in mind when I was in secondary school. But listen, if you're at that point in your life right now where you're trying to make, a monumental decision, because the choices that you make now will determine how the rest of your life. On the show this morning, we have a representative from the Fiji Higher Education Commission to tell us more about tertiary education and higher education and what the difference is and why it's so important. Good morning, Dr. Nikhat Shameem. How are you this morning?
I'm fine, thank you very much.
Welcome to breakfast.
Thank you for inviting me on.
Okay, so one of the things that you hear a lot when we were in secondary school, because this is the time of the year where a lot of universities and colleges are kind of promoting the different courses that they offer, is the terms tertiary education and higher education. To be quite honest, I always thought they were one and the same thing, but there is a difference, yes?
There could be a difference.
Okay.
Generally speaking, people think that tertiary education includes mainly academic work. But actually, higher education is a lot broader than that.
Mm-hmm.
It is about anything that happens after secondary school. It is about technical and vocational education as well as academic education. So you're not just talking about universities. You're also talking about other institutions that offer award conferring programs beyond secondary school.
Okay.
So tell us about the organization that you're from, the Fiji Higher Education that you're all about. Tell us about what the organization is all about and what do you do.
Okay, it's FHEC, Fiji Higher Education Commission,
Mm-hmm.
and really what we do is we try and regulate the higher education sector so that we ensure that the people who are getting access to higher education are getting access to good higher education, quality higher education, and that the institutions that offer them are recognized first of all and then registered after that, so that we know that the qualifications that are being offered are good qualifications and are according to quality standards of education.
I see.
So that's mainly the first thing. The second thing also is that we are available to students so that if they have any queries or inquiries or complaints about higher education institutions, we also help them to resolve those complaints. We talk to the higher education institutions and see what the problem is, and we try and support the students. For us, our clients are the students, are the learners. That's the most important thing. The secondly, parents and communities. And then we also work with the higher education institutions. But generally, we serve the interest of the child.
Okay. When you talk about serving the interests of the child, for a lot of children, I shouldn't say children, but for a lot of young adults now, they're making those decisions. What course do I take? Which university should I go to? What overall advice would you give a secondary school student, maybe their parents or their family, as they're getting ready to make these very important decisions?
That's a really tough decision to make. Look, I have a 17-year-old boy, and I am going through those decisions myself at the moment. I think the most important thing is to begin, as we would say, with the end in mind. What do you want to do at the end of it? And often we go into study thinking this is my area of interest, but we don't really think about how employable we're going to be at the end of it.
Yes.
So it's really important to know what is available out there and how is that going to get you where you want to go. Yeah. So my parents wanted me to be a doctor, but I became the wrong kind of a doctor. Don't give me anybody to operate on. But yes, so we make decisions, and of course I didn't become a doctor because it wasn't something I wanted to do. So sometimes we force children into things that they don't really want to do. It's not in their calling. So I think that is number one. Work to the interest of the child, but then also think about what's going to happen at the end. What are the things that this country needs in terms of skills, employment, that we need to really support our children to go through?
One of the things that students often ask is, okay, I've studied for months and months on end, weeks in and out, to get get high marks and I've achieved these high marks, but yet I don't qualify for a topper scholarship. Why is this?
I've heard that too. Look, the country has priorities. Every country in the world, wherever you are, you have a strategic plan and a priority. So there's no difference with Fiji. Fiji too has priorities because Fiji knows where those gaps are. So when people get high marks, they don't get scholarships simply because they are not in a skill area that is a priority for this nation.
I see. Right.
Okay.
So they get high marks and they still have access to the loan scheme, of course, but they will not get a topper scholarship simply because it's not in a priority area as a nation. So it is really important for careers teachers in schools to know what those priority areas are for this country and to support the students to know where they need to apply for to be able to have access to those topper scholarships. Not just careers teachers, but I think it's really important for parents also to know where those skill gaps are and then to support their children. If they want their students, their children, the learners to get scholarships, they really do need to have some idea about what this nation needs.
Perhaps to share with our parents at home this morning, how do they get such information as to, in the next 5 years or so, what jobs are available for my child?
Very important question. The Ministry of Education. That's your first stop. Now, your careers teachers will have access to the Ministry of Education, and that's how they work. So the Ministry of Education advises the career teachers in schools, and then the career teachers are available to advise the students. So it's pretty foolproof. You can't go wrong with that because you know what the nation's priorities are through what is available on the ground in your school. And parents also have access to that information.
I guess my question is, you know, if everybody has access to the same information, if all of the career teachers are telling all of our students the same thing, like this is where we have a gap. This is probably a skill or an area that you should go into. And I only say this because this is something that Sylvester and I saw when we were in tertiary education for as little time as we were there. But my friends and I, we were either taking IT or IS. By the time they graduated, we had moved on to radio by then. By the time they graduated, you had all of these people who had IT degrees and IS degrees, but there weren't enough jobs to go around. Is that something that could happen? Is that something that FHEC kind of worries about as well? That sometimes you might have too many people qualified for a certain area?
It is an issue, yes, and we work with the stakeholders. For example, we work with the medical stakeholders, we work with the Ministry of Education, we work with the teachers' organizations, and we try and ensure that where the skills gaps are, we have some numbers. That we have a projected idea about what might be needed in the future, and then we work with higher education institutions to ensure that we don't have an oversupply of graduates. I admit that it's still an issue, that it's still a problem, but it is something that we're working with very closely, very carefully with the Ministry of Education, and we hold those meetings together with the Ministry of Education, plus the stakeholders, because remember the stakeholders are the ones that license. Yeah, so with like for medical students, for example, we may register the institution and the programs, we accredit the programs, but ultimately the licensing is given by the licensing authority, which is the Fiji Medical Council. So you need to work together. You know, it's a collaborative effort. It's just not one organization that can make all the decisions.
Do you often see, like sometimes with maybe there's a gap area, but maybe, I don't know, students or tertiary students kind of don't want to get into that area? For example, I guess just to pull an example from there, like farming. You know, people would rather, you know, do graphic design or IT instead of having to go and learn about farming or agriculture. Does that happen sometimes?
Of course it happens. I mean, it could happen anywhere. Yeah. You start off with one thing and you change your mind and you do something else, or else you want to do something and that particular scholarship is not available, but then you have access to the loan scheme. If there's something else that you want to do that doesn't fall in line with the country's priorities but is of passionate interest to you, then you do have access to the loan scheme, and that too is a really good thing. We don't have a lot to do with the loan scheme because of course that's worked at with TSLB. We have a close relationship with them, but we don't actually have anything to do with them. The other thing of course is to know fairly early on, perhaps in the final year of school, as to where you want to go. Do you want to do farming or do you want to do IS? And if it is you want to do farming and it's not in a priority area, then you need to think about the loan scheme or whether your parents can afford to send you to tertiary. So these are decisions I think that 16, 17, 18-year-olds can make. And if they're not making it, we as parents need to train our children to make those decisions. And you know, it's good because later on in life you're going to have to make those decisions again. I mean, who starts off with one? Very few people start off with one dream and carry that dream through to the end. I've just heard from you two that you started off with one dream and you ended up with another dream. Yeah? That's life. You know, we all do that. I mean, you know, every 3-4 years I've changed jobs.
Okay.
Because of my interest. You know, I think, oh, I'm doing this. Oh, but that looks interesting. Can I apply for that? Will somebody believe that I'm good enough for that? Let me try it. And that's what life is. And, you know, gone are the days when you were great because you were 20 years in the same job. It doesn't happen anymore.
Right.
Now you're 20 years in the same job, people think, what's wrong with you?
Yeah,
You're
that's
right.
true. That's true. Why
So
haven't
you
you
have
moved?
to move. You have to give yourself that room to grow, and you have to give your children that room to grow.
Look, Doctor, time is caught up on us this morning, but we're moving on towards the last term of school for the year, and this is the term where exams come into place. A lot of decisions, a lot of time in studying. Maybe a message to our families at home in terms of preparing themselves for higher education.
I think the most important thing about higher education is to realize that the university is not the only thing that's available. There are many other choices for students to make now. I think it's very important for them to understand those choices. And very importantly, it is important, I think, for parents, career teachers, anybody who guides these students to understand what those choices are and to help the students make very practical choices that are going to lead them to a life out there where they will be self-sustaining, that they can sustain themselves, they can sustain their children, and of course, very importantly, they can sustain their aging parents. That'd be me.
Doctor, it's so nice to have you on the show this morning.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
You're welcome.
Stay with us. We've got more for you on Breakfast at Fiji One right after this.